Okay, today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. It's week 3, and if you haven't tried your first bet yet on Hard Rock, there's still time for you to get 150 in bonus bets if you win. Just place a $5 bet. If it hits, you not only get your winnings, but 150 in bonus bets. Thursday Night Football is happening, AFC East. The Dolphins going to the Bills. I like the Bills big, not only to cover the spread, but every prop when it comes to Josh Allen. I think he goes nuts. Throws several touchdowns, runs for a touchdown. I like to have a massive game and dominate the Dolphins. We got big-time college football coming up. I do like a couple underdogs. I do think Auburn, who played Oklahoma really well last year, is going to be feisty in this game. I also think Texas Tech against Utah. I think Utah's pretty good, but Texas Tech had a bunch of guys come in the transfer portal. They spent a lot of money on this team, as well as Tulane against Ole Miss. I like those underdogs to keep it frisky. Hard Rock Bet has new promos every day. This week's, there's profit boost for 5 straight days of football. That's a Thursday night profit boost, a Friday college profit boost, another profit boost Saturday's college games, plus NFL Sunday, like the Steelers big that weekend, and Monday night, kind of like the Lions. Let's get it on. What is going on, everybody? How are we doing? Before we talk about the fighting Miami Dolphins, who showed a lot of heart and some moxie tonight. They went out, very respectable Thursday night performance against one of, if not the best team in the league. I got to tell you, subscribe to the channel. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you want to listen to this podcast, find it on audio form, wherever you may listen. Spotify, Apple. I kind of go back and forth between the two to listen to podcasts. But make sure you subscribe to everything we do, and you'll never miss anything because we got a lot of content flowing. Tonight, I do want to defend Mike McDaniel because I do think we've kind of jumped the shark on the conversation surrounding him. Some thoughts on the Buffalo Bills, who are now 3-0. And look poised to compete for the number 1 seed, obviously, and have as good of a chance with the Chiefs down a little bit and some of their ownage right now on the Ravens to represent the AFC when it comes to, this January headed to the Super Bowl in Santa Clara. Actually, I went to that Super Bowl last time it was there. Cam Newton against the Denver Broncos. Hammered Denver money line on that one. Paid pretty well. And we'll dive into a couple other things that are happening this weekend. It's Fugazi Friday. So I do want to bring in a couple of Fugazis and combine them both and relate it to the NFL league office because I think we're all looking at this little incorrectly when it comes to Tush Push, when it comes to Tom Brady and Chip Kelly and game planning and all that stuff. And yeah, we'll talk a little backup quarterbacks, but we won't keep you too late tonight. But before we dive in to any football, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, GameTime. Best in the business. Nights like tonight, I'm sitting there with my wife and I go, that place looks awesome. This is the last year of the stadium. It's been there since the early 70s, as Al Michaels said. And there's like a SEC level vibe up there in Buffalo. And if you ever get the opportunity to go to those games, I mean, I know some people that are huge Bills fans. Like, it's a great time to be a Bills fan. It's a great time to enjoy that environment. That place was rocking. Any game you want to go to, college, pro, baseball games. We got the playoffs right around the corner. The NBA, college basketball is not too far away. Concerts, comedy shows, we got you covered. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code JOHN, that's JOHN, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem the code JOHN, that's my name. $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. The last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. I know they lost, but they have been a headline honestly going back to training camp because everyone thought Mike McDaniel is going to get fired. And Rex Ryan called him a nerd, a couple weeks ago. That kind of went viral. A lot of people had different takes. Like, listen, yeah, he's an Ivy League guy. He looks kind of nerdy. But here's what I do know, and I want to defend Mike McDaniel for a second. Not everyone's meant to be a head coach. Vic Fangio is widely considered not just one of the best defensive coordinator in the league, but one of the best of his generation. He's got an opportunity now winning a Super Bowl, might win another. He's been a Super Bowl defensive coordinator with Harbaugh. I mean, his resume speaks for itself. He's not a head coach. He is a fantastic coordinator. And I've said this forever about the NFL. It's Wall Street on grass. And when I don't just mean the hours and how big of a grind it is, whether you're working on Wall Street or in finance, or whether you are a coach or an executive. You work crazy hours during the season. You do not sleep much. You are drinking a ton of coffee, probably a prescription to Adderall. It's the only ways you can keep your eyes open. But it pays a lot. And obviously, if you're the head honcho in finance, the CEO, the boss, in football, the GM, the head coach, you make millions upon millions of dollars. But guess what in the NFL? If you're a coordinator, Vic Fangio, you make 5 or 6. And Mike McDaniel has talked about like he's completely over his head. A lot of guys aren't meant to be head coaches. There's nothing wrong with that. Here's what I know. We have seen some guys who are also over their head that honestly have no business even being in the role they're in now. I think Brandon Staley is one of the most overrated coach in the history of football. Definitely since I've been doing this, either working in football or talking about football. Matt Eberflus might just be atrocious at his job. So we see guys that, yeah, they get an opportunity to be a head coach. It's like first-round picks. Half the head coaches are going to get fired anyway. A lot of those guys go on to be coordinators and excel. Look around the league. Brian Flores had a lot of trouble being a head coach. Why? He couldn't deal with the offense. Elite defensive coordinator. Right there with Fangio as one of the best. Robert Saleh, kind of over his head being the head honcho. Awesome defensive coordinator. And they can do that role for a long time. I'm watching Mike McDaniel. Everyone's making fun of him. It's like, he's not the guy picking the players. His GM, we give Ryan Poles a lot of crap, rightfully so. I mean, he's brought some of this on himself, self-inflicted. He looks like Ron Wolf compared to Chris Greer in Miami. Their roster is atrocious. So, yeah, Mike McDaniel is going to need a good GM. He clearly doesn't have one if he was even going to have a shot, and clearly knows nothing about defense. I mean, they had Vic Fangio in the building. Vic couldn't get out of there quick enough. Now, I'd argue whether it was Mike McDaniel or whether it's, give me a high-level coach. I don't know if you can win in Miami in this modern-day society with the money, with everything going on. I think it is an uphill battle. I really do. Having to compete against Buffalo, guess what Sean McDermott doesn't have to deal with? Clubs open till 6 in the morning, right? It's a completely different animal. There's a lot more to do down there, and clearly a lot of guys are screwing off, and it's hard to keep guys just focused and dialed in on football. But I know Mike's really good at coaching offense because I see Tua, who's an average talent, look really good consistently over the last 3 or 4 years. Now, once it gets cold, because he's kind of got a pea shooter arm, he's going to have limitations. But how many times tonight on 3rd and 7, on 3rd and 8, on 3rd and 6, does Mike have a play dialed up because he is a really good offensive mind? So Rex called him a nerd a couple weeks ago. He is a nerd who knows a ton about offense and is good at dealing with the quarterback. Last time I checked, that's pretty valuable. Should he be a head coach? Probably not. Is he going to get fired? All signs point to that. Whether that's next week, in 2 weeks, at the end of the season, I know this. I see a lot of guys get fired as head coaches, and they immediately get coordinator jobs. And I laugh. I go, I wouldn't touch that guy with a 10-foot pole. This guy should have half the league lined up to coach their offense. He not only can communicate and coach and build up a quarterback who has average talent, he can scheme guys wide open. And I'll never forget, I used to be around the 49ers a lot, and Kyle Juszczyk told me one time, this guy is so good with the run game. Obviously, their run game now, Ollie Gordon, a couple years ago, was really good. Ollie had a good run tonight. A couple years ago, I mean, he looked like a superstar in college at Oklahoma State. But countless times tonight, it's like, I think this drive's going to stall, and then boom, Tua hits a guy who's literally wide open. And then back-to-back weeks, the game flipped on Tua, who I'm sure they're not coaching stares down a wide receiver the moment the ball is snapped. Both times, picked off, basically ended the game. But I'm watching Mike McDaniel, and everyone's shitting on the guy. And I mean everyone. And listen, I've been guilty too. He's not a head coach, but he's not that bad. And he clearly has a skill that translates to a lot of teams around the league that would be desperate to coach up the quarterback and get my offense rolling in the right direction. Tua has 4 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. I thought tonight in the second half, up until the pick, he was playing pretty well. And a lot of that has to do with Mike having guys wide open. Now, I wouldn't call the Bills the 85 Bears on defense, but I thought McDaniel was kind of having his way the second half of the game. And you could tell the moment they get the roughing the punter play go against them, which by the letter of the law, obviously you got to throw the flag. I hate that play. I mean, I really do. I thought that was one like, malicious intent. He was in the air. It's a defensive tackle. It is what it is. But once that happens, you could see Mike screaming. He knows that's the game, and that's it all feels inevitable. But I don't follow the Dolphins as close, obviously, as if you're like a diehard Dolphins fan. Being on the West Coast, the AFC East, beside Belichick and Brady, or now Josh Allen, I'm not super dialed in to every moment of the Jets. But I've read enough articles now, just because they've been pretty prevalent. Like, people think that Chris Greer could survive. Why? Because he knows where the bodies are buried. So anytime you have a situation like that, it just shows you how dysfunctional this organization is. I do think it's going to be difficult for them to hire a guy. But I think the conversation on Mike McDaniel, where he's being talked about like he's Jim Tom Sula, is absolutely laughable. And I just felt like I had to defend him because, listen, are the Dolphins going to win that many games? No. They're not going to be as bad as people think, because typically when you have like the number 1 overall pick, last year the Titans, you have no quarterback play. We've seen before, like with the Panthers or the Jags, you have the worst quarterback play in the league. The one year that the Lions went winless, or the year the Colts ended up with Andrew Luck, they have too good of quarterback play not to win some games. So I just think the conversation has taken on a life of its own, where it's like the GM is a joke. And let's face it, I mean, I think the owner, while he has a lot of money, relative to the rest of the league, would be viewed as someone that most people wouldn't be lined up to work for. So let's pump the brakes on just acting like Mike McDaniel should like go to high school once he gets fired. When it comes to the Bills, I feel pretty confident saying this is Josh is one of the more talented and best players I've ever seen. It doesn't mean he has the resume of some of these guys, and obviously he has a contemporary that already has 3 Super Bowls and 2 MVPs. So even if Josh maximizes everything, the chance that he ever gets to multiple Super Bowls, just Super Bowl bursts, is going to be difficult, let alone become a champion. But like, we've all watched sports long enough. You know it when you see it. You're like, this is different. And I do think when you look at the group, and one conversation that happens, and I got a DM about this recently, because Purdy's often pretty polarizing, goes, well, Brock was awesome when he had a bunch of sweet players, and he's not as good without him. It's like, yeah, welcome to the NFL. Last time I checked, Joe Montana was throwing to, oh yeah, Jerry Rice. Peyton Manning was throwing to Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne. When Patrick Mahomes hit the scene and became a legend, he was throwing to Tyreek Hill and prime Travis Kelce. It kind of helps to have some of those guys. I'm watching Josh Allen. Cook is an awesome player. And ever since they've kind of thrown him into the mix a couple years ago and he's become a stalwart of the offense, he's changed kind of their identity and their franchise, I think. They're clearly a better team now with him than they were before, kind of searching for the running back. I like Khalil Shakir. I root for my small school guys, Boise State. He's solid, right? Keon Coleman. I mean, okay. I think he's pretty funny when he makes his Tiger Woods jokes at the combine or puts on the coats. But, hey, man, when the ball hits your hands, you kind of need to catch it. Palmer, who they got from the Chargers, solid. I mean, he's not exactly throwing to, Andre Reed and Stevie Johnson out there. His offensive weapons from a skill position, he's got some good tight ends. But, I mean, we got to factor in who he's playing with here. He's incredible. And tonight they started playing with their food a little bit in the second half and stalled out. But this offense, I mean, One thing I wrote down late in the game, I said the difference between the Bills and what feels like the Ravens these last couple years, obviously the Chiefs, and now what it looks like the Chargers, is at any given moment for those teams when they're humming, their defense can just pick six or some incredible pick across the middle or some strip sack. And I feel like the Bills, they win a lot of games just because Josh does Josh things nonstop. He's like an NBA player. It's like, if you don't score 40 tonight, we're losing. Where some of these other quarterbacks can play in individual games, like, yeah, I had an off game, but my defense had held them to 13 points, and they had a pick six, and they caused a fumble. It rarely happens with the Bills. And then right on cue, Bernard picks it off on a play that, Tua just gave to him. If their defense comes through with timely plays, they're never going to be statistically as good as some of the top defenses in the league. But if Joey Bosa can stay on the field and they can come up with timely plays, specifically turnovers, they can win the Super Bowl. We knew that coming in. I mean, they clearly were one of the betting favorites to win the Super Bowl. But when you have a guy like this in the prime of their career, when you have a bunch of guys who have been in these big games, and your defense personnel is what it is, but like they've come through in some big moments over the last couple of years. And to me, for them to win, it's going to be a pick or a big strip. Because offensively, when it comes to their quarterback, what they say tonight, for the last 5 straight years, he's had over 40 touchdowns, passing and running each and every season. He's obviously the reigning MVP. Feels like he's at the point, and Lamar got to this point a couple years ago. It's like they just get incrementally better every year. Like every year you see him, it's like this guy's a little bit better and he's unstoppable. I mean, Tua admitted it. Tua's a guy that got $200 million and 150 of it guaranteed and is going to start in the league for a decade plus, was drafted 5th overall. He's like, yeah, I can't even do half of what that guy can do. It's not like he was just being dead honest. I saw a lot of people trying to, dive into Tua's psyche on that. Like, what's he supposed to say? I'm as good as Josh Allen? His mom would say, Tua, you can't lie and say that. We all know what he said is, honestly, he's probably being too nice to himself. He's like, maybe it's quarter of as good. I mean, he can't remotely do anything Josh can do. On one play tonight where Tyreek probably should have caught it, they just ran a deep post and Tua let it rip. The ball just floated up in the air. It's like, that ball looks, and it's not even cold yet. I mean, it's September 18th. But the gap between those two guys, and we talk about this all the time in the NFL, like Tua is on the low end of the second or third tier of quarterbacks. So even if your roster was good enough, your margin for error playing the top guy is slim to none. And then when your roster is clearly, and they got injuries as well, but as shitty as it is, and I try to bring this into light, like Brandon Beane gets a lot of credit, right? Eric DeCosta gets a lot of credit. Brett Veach gets a lot of credit. Ortiz is going to get a lot of credit. Sometimes GMs fly a little under the radar, and the coach takes all the heat. It's like, I don't think Mike McDaniel's picking every player on the draft board. So the talent gap in this game was obviously pretty wide, but the quarterback gap couldn't be any wider. And you just got to acknowledge, we got no shot. Like, we got no shot to beat those guys. That's why the Bills are going to win this division for the foreseeable future. I mean, unless Drake May takes a gigantic step in the next couple of years, it's not even going to be a fair fight. And if you're a Bills fan, for as crappy as a lot of this decade was, right, if you're my age, you would have come into your own as a sports fan right as they were making the Super Bowls, which they showed the highlight tonight of Norwood kicking that 47-yarder that he missed, that Al Michaels was calling in Tampa Bay. I feel like we got to do some sort of study why these kickers' legs are so much stronger now. They showed one angle like, yeah, that might have cleared from like 52, 53 yards. How could a kicker struggle to kick long kicks forever? Like, why over the last several years has it been like, oh yeah, 60 yards, no problem. It's pretty crazy, but most of the 2000s, your franchise was an embarrassment. The Patriots beat the living crap out of you. And now you're not only the real deal franchise, you're like legitimately one of the star brands of the league, led by your MVP quarterback and just your overall team. So I'm going to keep saying this all year long about Lamar too. If not now, then when? If not now, then when? For both those guys. I do feel confident saying this. If the Ravens or the Bills are not representing the AFC in the Super Bowl, it is a failure for those teams. It really is. And, obviously they play themselves like they did last year in the second round. Someone has to lose. But I don't see a scenario where it's not devastating. Like, one, it would be a incredible upset if one of those two teams is not in the conference championship. I mean, the Bills are going to be in a pretty good position to have the 1 seed. Be a little harder for the Ravens, especially if they drop one of these next couple games. They play the Lions this week. I think they play Chiefs in a couple weeks. Their division can get a little weird too. I guess Burrow's out, so that helps definitely. But if the Bills get the number 1 seed, it'll just be like Super Bowl berth or bust, and that's how it kind of feels. But when back to their defense, when you do have some holes, now we'll see. They get some guys back. Ed Oliver didn't play tonight. Their first round pick, who's on PUP or IR or whatever, will come back in a couple weeks, and ideally, like, he can just be a good player for them at the second half of the season. Their first rounder from Kentucky, but the Bills are there's a fun team to watch, and that's the power of the NFL. Right, for most of this decade, in the Manning, in the Brady, in the Aaron Rodgers, the Breeze, the Roethlisberger, the Eli, kind of that era, this franchise was a joke. I mean, some of their highlights were Fitzpatrick, competing for like 8-9 wins. And now it's like, how many games could they win? 15? So if you're a Bills fan, you got to feel pretty good about this. And really quick on the backup quarterbacks. And speaking of Tua, we do this a lot, and I can be guilty of this too. Like, I'm not immune to this by any means. Is when we talk about the top guys, right? Lamar and Josh are first ballot Hall of Famers. I promise you that. Obviously, Mahomes already has a resume to be like one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Herbert is coming. If Burrow can just stay on the field, his resume speaks for itself. Even Jaden Daniels, long way to go, but when he's been on the field, he's been pretty good. But then there's that group of guys, right? From Goff to, I know Jalen won a Super Bowl, but statistically, like passing wise, he can leave a little something to be desired. From Purdy to Dak to Cousins forever. We talk so much about these guys, and Tua's at the lower end of this. It's like, why would you pay these guys? Why do you got to stick? Why are we doing this? And listen, we can argue how much you should pay them. Like, should Dak Prescott be the highest paid person in the league? Of course not. Should Dak Prescott, relative to some of these other guys, make like $38-40 million, or Purdy make a little? Yeah, but that's not really the way it works. It never really has. It's probably not going to change anytime soon. But there's a reason of like, why didn't they just go to someone else? Do you see the backup quarterbacks that are playing this week? Wait till you watch some of these guys play, right? Especially if they have to play multiple games. If you are a backup quarterback, I'd argue, and you have to start, let's say, 4 games. If you win 2 of them, you have not only earned your salary, you're underpaid. If you can win a game as a backup quarterback, I'm not talking about a guy that comes into the game. I'm talking about your quarterback's out, you're starting on Monday all week long. The other team knows you're starting, and they game plan around you. And you can win a game, you've earned your salary. That's how low the bar is, because we see it all the time. That's how bad these guys typically are. Typically, your backup does not turn out to be Steve Young or Aaron Rodgers. It's a guy that's going to bounce on team to team. Or, ideally, if you got like a Patrick Mahomes and it's a Chad Henne, he never has to play. But every once in a while, quarterback rolls an ankle, hurts a shoulder, sprains a knee, and the backup gets thrown in there. Like Carson Wentz, Marcus Mariota. I'll promise you this, my expectations are pretty low. It's why I said about Sean McVay when he was kind of worried about Matt Stafford. He said, Jimmy Garoppolo is the best starting or backup quarterback. We think we have the number 1 backup quarterback who could be a starter multiple places in the league. I said, I know you're gassing him up, Sean, but I disagree. And I don't think, especially if you're playing a decent team, you would be any lock to win a game with that guy playing a quarterback for you. Not the way that he's played recently. And I think we got to be careful, especially because the draft and the college football now is clearly the second best sport in America. Think about the conversation this offseason in mock drafts having Arch Manning as the number 1 overall pick. Honestly, sometimes shitting on him pains me because my youth, when I was a pure sports fan, before I ever got into business or worked in football or anything, I loved Peyton Manning. Like in the late 90s, early 2000s, Peyton Manning was my favorite player. And I used to hate the Patriots. I used to want him to beat him, but he couldn't. So I've been rooting for the Manning family forever, but we got to call a spade a spade. The guy can't complete an out route. And it's like, should the Dallas Cowboys, should the Cleveland Browns tank for Arch? Are we sure Arch is going to be the starting quarterback October 1st? I mean, what are we? It in college football, and we were talking about this before we hit record tonight. In basketball, for example, a guy coming out of high school, this guy's going to be a top 3 pick. He could have a bad college season. More than likely, worst case scenario will be like the 5th pick. In football, the moment you play 3 bad games, people are like, whoa, what is going on here? And all I heard, this college quarterback, it's going to be a great college quarterback season. I'm watching these guys. I got Lagway throwing 5 interceptions. I got Sellers concussed. I got Garrett Nussmeier, who I'm rooting for. Let's face it, his ceiling's like a Kirk Cousins. So sometimes we overhype because we root for these guys. Most of them, guess what, are not going to turn out to be Jared Goff or Dak Prescott. Won't sniff being as good as Brock Purdy. Why? Because this is really, really difficult. And the moment these guys get hurt and we're sitting on our couch watching some of these games with backup facing backup, you'll realize why. They're playing a different sport. And even the guys we try to gas up, J.J. McCarthy, big-time prospect. Am I watching this? What am I watching? Justin Jefferson's wide open. He can't hit him. It's very, very difficult. This is really, really hard. The college game, even as the games have morphed, a lot of it does not translate to Sundays or Thursday nights or Monday nights, doubleheaders. You know what I mean? So I think sometimes we got to be careful about shitting on all these quarterbacks because most of them are not Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. But the reality is most of the other guys aren't like Tua. Think about that. Tua Tagovailoa is better than like half the NFL. The starting quarterbacks, let alone all the backups that we're going to have to watch this week. Can I hit on a quick Fugazi Friday? I think sometimes the 2 biggest conversations this week have been, which if you listen to any podcasts, watch any shows, it's kind of been everywhere. It's been impossible if you're following people on Twitter or on Instagram, seeing a lot of talk on the tush push and talk about Tom Brady. And I think one thing when people think the National Football League, they think like they really care about all this stuff. And one thing I learned a long time ago, and it really was evident in 2011. And when I think the NFL, I think Raj and the owners. Guess what the owners don't always care about? What their GMs and coaches do. Most of the times, they don't really give a shit. You know when the league dramatically changed was in 2011 during the CBA. When the players were like, we want more money. And the league was like, no. And then the players were like, okay, we'll take a little more money, but we want no more double days. And every 4th day in training camp, a day off, and limitations on pads in practice. And the owners were like, so wait, we can give you similar amount of money, but you just don't want any of that stuff? Do you know who they didn't ask? Their coaches or their GMs what they thought about it. Because there's not a coach alive that would have been like, yeah, just get rid of double days. Give us limitations during the season when they can wear shoulder pads and helmets. The owner said, yeah, sign me up. And I think sometimes we think Roger Goodell, who's obviously a pretty polarizing figure over the years, all he cares about, and rightfully so, is making the league more money. And the place where they make the majority of their money, I think it's anywhere between like 60 to 65%, is on the games on TV. And I thought Colin had a pretty good take today about the tush push. It's getting overused now. To me, where the play is going to die is because it's really boring to watch. And it feels like every time you watch the Eagles, who are going to be playing in a lot of primetime games, they're using it over and over and over again. But I'll promise you this. Do you think Goodell cares logistically about where guys are lining up, where you're pushing, the integrity of the game, the rule? He doesn't care at all. Honestly, he probably likes at times people just talking about football, the tush push. But there gets to a point where he starts going, yeah, people watching this, it's kind of turning people off. See ya. It's over. The Tom Brady situation. It's important, like back in the day when the NBA let Michael Jordan by the Charlotte Bobcats for actually cheaper than market value because they wanted Michael involved. Why? Because he's the most important sports figure, at least of my lifetime, any sport, and that includes Tom Brady. I think the NFL views Tom similarly, right? He wants to be involved. They want him involved. It's just good for business to keep guys like him around. Well, then Fox came after him because Fox wants to legitimize as this thing changes and streamers get involved. They never want to lose the NFL because if they ever lost the NFL, obviously it would cripple their business just like it would NBC, CBS, or whatever. And Tom, having him, whether it turns out he's really good, whether he's peaked, wherever, gives them a lot of credibility with advertisers, with the league. It's important. The league doesn't actually care that much if Tom finds out inside information on some random linebacker that the Raiders sign in a year. Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, I'm sure do. They don't want. But if you think Roger Goodell worries about that, you're high on some good stuff because he does not give a shit. The problem is one, only Tom Brady could pull this off. Because this headache, if it was the equivalent of Greg Olson, a Mark Sanchez, a whoever, just some former NFL player that's calling, would not be worth the headache and dealing with these questions and getting calls from the Florios and the Big J's. It'd be a pain in the ass. But it's Tom Brady, so they deal with it. And they probably overlook it. And they're like, we'll just deal with it later. But this situation, to think that they really worry about the integrity, they do not care. They never really have. They pretend to care. They only care about making more money. And in fairness, that's their job. It's like running a public company. What's their number one role? To do whatever is best for the shareholders. That's all that matters. And for Raj and the league office, when it comes to Tush Push, when it comes to Tom Brady, the only thing truly they care about is this going to slow us down from making more money? That's as cutthroat as this league is. So all this talk about the integrity of jumping off sides and the Tush Push and Brady and the knowledge. And listen, I've talked a lot about this. But at the end of the day, if you think those people in New York are worrying about it for the reasons that we are, fans are, you're just that's the biggest Fugazi going because they just simply are not. Other than that, I'm pretty excited for college football actually this weekend. I was putting together a little parlay. Yeah, I don't quite understand why Indiana is favored by so much against Illinois. Because Indiana plays nobody, I'm really rooting for Bielema. But one story that came out, and we'll end on this, is this college football rule that they're going to get rid of one of the transfer portal times. So you only have one time a year to go into the transfer portal, and that would potentially be in the fall. Now, some of the coaches have pushed back against it because some of these teams are in the playoffs, and it's complicated. This whole college football thing is complicated, and there aren't easy answers to this. I do think one thing they need to institute is, like a coach, if I sign a contract, there are stipulations. I can't leave without a buyout, and you can't fire me without a buyout. I think if we got somehow that, hey, if you are coming out of high school or in the transfer portal and you are going to sign an NIL contract, right? If I sign a contract with the volume, whatever it stipulates, for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years, there are things on both sides where it's like, you can't get rid of me without giving me X, and I can't go do this without giving you Y. That's usually the way business works. And right now it does feel one-sided. And I think a large reason for this is the media was so adamant about these guys not getting paid, which, looking back, watching them paid, feels so stupid that we went this long with just allow them to have money. But with money, all of us that earn money in the real world, because that's what this is now, they are professionals, usually there's something behind it. Unless you're, Kawhi Leonard and you have a company pretending to plant trees so people feel good about getting in their private jet, flying to a state, 3 hours away to eat lunch and flying back, and they don't want to feel bad when they're tweeting about certain things. And it's a giant, talk about a Fugazi Ponzi scheme. Holy shit. But these guys are clearly being paid. And listen, most of them, and Deion Sanders said this last year, I only see Travis and Shador in ads, and now Arch Manning. Most of these guys, they're not actually being paid for their brand. They're just being paid to play. That's fine. But there should be some, you can't just take my money and then leave 3 months later. I think it would solve a lot of issues. No different in the NFL. When I signed Josh Allen to a 5-year contract, even if I cut him after 2 or 3 years, there's guaranteed money involved. There's a give and take on both sides. And if you look at this thing, I think it would be easy solved, even if we just made it 2 years. You sign a contract for X amount of dollars. Maybe if you play better, you can increase your value, but you're stuck there for a couple years. Now, obviously, if a coach gets fired, if a coach leaves, or something like that happens, the transfer portal should open. I've never had a problem with that. But just like, yeah, I don't really like my situation, but I've been paid. Now I'm just going to bounce on you. That feels like an easy fix. It doesn't have to be a 4-year contract, but there should be some rules. Even Nico. Nico was there a couple years and then bounced. Like, I don't even have that big an issue with it. Dumb move. Obviously, wasn't the correct move. Looks really bad. But, Tennessee hasn't skipped a beat. They easily should have won that game. Easily strong, but they should have won the game. But I do think there has to be some common sense that comes here. And it does feel like we're limping in that direction. And this is the power of the NFL, which isn't tied to academics and all these separate conferences. It's like everything's under one umbrella. Whether they agree or disagree, they all kind of pull in the same direction. Their hands all part of the same cookie jar. And in this situation, like, well, Fox is paying me here. Well, CBS is paying me here. This conference, you got too many different agendas, too many people pulling in different directions. So it is really complicated. But I think the only way to kind of settle everything down a little bit is to make some just hard and fast rules. And you can change the transfer portal to once a year. I still think you would have some similar issues arise. Adios. Have a great weekend. Talk to everyone soon.